Hello everyone. Brian Moore from the Brant Historical Society has recorded a special presentation for us entitled Christmas Through the Centuries. Brian has been a volunteer with the Brant Historical Society since 2007 and has a lifelong interest in history and architecture. I'd like to thank him for preparing and doing this presentation for us. It's quite interesting and I hope you enjoy.
Good afternoon and welcome to Christmas Through the Centuries. My name is Brian Moore, and I've actually offered about 3 of these presentations before, and I've tried to consolidate several of them into this one presentation today. For early Christians, Easter was the important day in the calendar. Romans, when they were converted to Christianity, knew about the story of Romulus and Remus, and they wanted to know the story of the birth of Christ. They already celebrated, had a celebration called Saturnalia. It was 5 days. Part of the reason for that was because the Romans had 10 months to the year, and each month was 36 days. 360 leaves them 5 days for a special celebration, and that was Saturnalia. Saturnalia was celebrated with candles, bonfires, greenery, and revelry. Christian Church wanted to replace Saturnalia, and so they looked around. 9 months earlier was the day of Annunciation, and so it made sense that Christmas would come 9 months after that. Early man measured a day from sunset to sunset. Thus, Christmas Eve and Christmas Day were considered the same day. In AD 336 is the earliest recorded celebration of Christmas in Rome. That same year, the winter solstice was on the 25th of December. And interestingly enough, our solstice has moved, and that's because it loses a day every 400 years. And thus, here we are, 1700 years later, and now our solstice is on the 21st of December. The Anglo-Saxon period, or the Dark Ages, was the time of conversion of many cultures throughout Europe. In 354 AD, Pope Liberius makes Christmas the official day on December the 25th. On 529, Emperor Justinian makes Christmas not just a religious holiday, but a civic holiday. For early mankind, and that's most of Europe, they celebrated their year through the cycles of the moon, not necessarily through a calendar like the Romans. And a lunar month is 29.4 days. As a result, you end up with 12 extra days needed to form a solar year. Societies had many ways of commemorating those 12 extra days, and Christians took full advantage of those 12 days to establish the 12 days of Christmas. In 567, the 12 days of Christmas were decreed by the Council of Tours. And in 877, the 12 days of Christmas holiday was ordered by law by King Alfred the Great of Britain. The 12 days of Christmas had several saint days within them, and they became feast days. The 26th, for example, was the feast of St. Stephen, the 27th, the feast of St. John, the 28th, the feast of the Holy Innocents, and that was, for the most part, the day that children got special attention. January the 1st was the feast of His Holy Name, and that was because Jesus was born as a Jew, and circumcision happens 8 days after birth, and that ends up coinciding with the Feast of Circumcision, a family celebration for all but the boy being circumcised. January the 5th is the 12th night revels, followed by Epiphany on January the 6th, when the 3 wise men were supposed to have arrived to find the baby Jesus. The 4th century also had the Bishop of Myra in Turkey becoming St. Nicholas, a patron saint of children students, and a gift giver for the needy. And his celebration date was December the 6th. Father Time and Father Winter are concepts from the Germanic and Norse Yuletide concepts, and we'll see how they evolved over time as well. In 995, Christmas was celebrated for the first time in Norway by King Olaf. This was likely the type of Christmas that the Vikings celebrated at Lanso Meadows when they were here in Newfoundland in 1000 AD. It's possibly the first Christmas celebration in North America. The medieval period, or the Norman period, in 1223, St. Francis of Assisi is said to have established the first nativity scene. It actually was a living nativity, but as often happens over time, you can't always recruit all the people to be part of the nativity scene, and so statuary became the norm for many nativity scenes. I mentioned in the title Norman period because Christmas gets a wealthy French flair in England with feasting, entertainment, gifting, and charity. Feasting, for example, in 1171, King Henry II spends Christmas in Ireland with guests feasting on crane. In 1213, King John provides 3,000 capons, 1,000 salted eels, 400 hogs, and 100 pounds of almonds, and 24 casks of wine for his celebration of Christmas. 1289 is the first recorded entry of the boar's head as a centerpiece for Christmas festivities, and it would go on to be used for centuries to come. Entertainment became more formal. While people were used to Christmas revelry on their own, formal entertaining was part of what the Normans brought to England. In 1347, King Edward III introduces mumming to royal Christmas entertainments. In 1228, King Henry IV pays Jack Travails and Company for seasonal entertainment. Gifting too. The season was seen as a time for gift giving, often, however, not done until New Year's. In 1111, King Henry determines he will wear not his crown at Christmas. In other words, he's prepared to be a normal or a regular man like anyone else. 1236, King Henry III of England is gifted a live elephant by King Louis of France. And in 1484, King Richard III spends 200 marks on Christmas presents. But an important addition is charity. St. Stephen's Day, or Boxing Day, was dedicated to opening alms boxes at the churches. Oh, I missed all of these boar's heads. I beg your pardon. I forgot to flip through all of the slides that I had prepared. Here's the alms box in one of the churches. And they were shared with the poor and the disadvantaged. In 1239, King Henry III opens a hall at Windsor Castle to feed and clothe the poor. In 1283, King Edward feeds 500 beggars of London. In 1415, King Henry III orders food distributed to the citizens of Rouen, France, trapped by his own English army in a siege of the city. The early Renaissance period is 1492 until 1640. The creation of the mechanical clock puts midnight in the middle of the night. Thus, Christmas Eve becomes a separate occasion for celebration. The masque, or play, gets a higher profile, and the Christmas pageant telling the Bible story becomes a focal point of celebrations. the image of Father Time and Father Christmas blends over time. And commercialism is more and more apparent every year, with Christmas markets springing up all over Europe. On Christmas Day in 1492, Christopher Columbus's ship, Santa Maria, ran aground on Hispaniola. In 1564, a hard frost in England freezes the Thames River for one of the few times in its history. In 1589, by order of Queen Elizabeth I, the English gentry spends Christmas on their estates to keep hospitality amongst their neighbors. It was a way of ensuring that the gentry continued to be in contact with their own people on their lands, something that Queen Elizabeth was concerned that they were beginning to lose connection with their own people. And it's actually become a tradition over time that now the gentry host a Christmas celebration. 1608, Jamestown Colony in Virginia boasts finer food and much more warmth than Great Britain. The Puritan period of 1640 to 1660 brings an entire set of reforms. Religious reform and Christmas are seen as, Christmas is seen as being far too wild a party with very little religion. And as a result, there are all kinds of restrictions. So there are moves to outlaw Christmas. And unfortunately, it becomes a regular day of work for most people of England. Though, believe it or not, many people continue to celebrate in their own homes out of sight of others. Scenes about the Nativity are banned as idolatry, and Puritans in the New England states ban Christmas as well. Already in 1583, Glasgow churchmen forbid Christmas observances. Scotland was very Calvinist, and in 1588, Haddington Presbytery forbid the singing of carols. In 1647, the English Parliament declared Christmas Day a penance, a day of penance, not of feasting. And that same year, the London Lord Mayor's men ride about burning all the evergreen decorations they find. In 1657, Puritan troopers raid English churches holding Christmas services on that particular Saturday morning. The later Renaissance period comes after the Puritan period and runs from 1660 to roughly 1760. In 1660, Christmas is celebrated once again in England. In 1690, Scotland celebrates Christmas officially for the last time until 1958. 1714, King George I tastes Christmas pudding for the very first time, made of 5 pounds of suet and 1 pound of plums. They call it plum pudding, but in those days, plums was a catch-all phrase for all dried fruit, so it included figs and dates and raisins. There was a return to public church services, and carol singing also returned, but not in churches yet. Christmas returns to a multi-day celebration, but charity is still needed. Following celebrating at home for 2 decades, playing parlor games is popular. Puppet shows, such as Punch and Judy, and pantomime become popular Christmas social entertainments. In 1734, Christmas oratorio was performed for the first time, with J.S. Bach conducting. Mumming, or dressing up in costume to pretend to be something you're not, is a custom adopted by the common folk, not just in the king's household. The carol, The 12 Days of Christmas, is an example of how Catholics need to continue to hide their rituals within Protestant Europe. This is the kind of Christmas most settlers had when this land was explored. French-Canadian Christmas from 1600 to 1760, the settlers had a religious or family-oriented celebration. Advent began the season with fasting and preparations. Christmas Day and Christmas Eve began with a midnight mass followed by a family dinner. New Year's Eve and New Year's Day were largely a community party where extended family and friends from far and wide were invited. In 1535, Jacques Cartier and crew celebrated the first known Christmas in Canada at the village of Stadacona, now Quebec City. In 1606, Samuel de Champlain established the Order of Good Cheer at Port Royal to keep the Christmas spirit alive throughout the winter. And in 1642, Jean de Brébeuf is credited with having penned the first Canadian carol, the Huron Carol, in the Wendat language. Christmas starts the social season through to Ash Wednesday. As portrayed, and the social season here is portrayed by Cornelius Krieghoff, with ice and snow permitting less work on the farm and the ice permitting easier travel on the lakes and rivers. The Loyalists, or settlers, and that's what I'm dressed as today, would have come during the Georgian period, and they brought a return to some past traditions and some new ones added, all affected by the Industrial Revolution. If there was decorating, it happened on Christmas Eve. It was unlucky to decorate before then. Decorations remained until just before Twelfth Night, when everything was cleared and burned to avoid bad luck. Burned all in the Twelfth Night bonfires. Settlers used evergreen to add color and scent to their homes. Catherine Parr Trail records that holly and ivy could not be found easily, so holly was replaced with wintergreen and cranberries. This time brought limited chores for those fully employed, but unemployed for others who had no work through the cold winter months. Gift giving was the exception, not the norm. For most settlers, Christmas Day was often a day of nostalgia, remembering family and friends back in the homeland. Early settlers passed Christmas Day much as they would any other ordinary day, going to work or doing household chores. But evening often was a house party, much as pictured here. Some wealthy settlers might have heron, swan, goose, beef, or minced meat pies like tourtière. But for most settlers, Christmas dinner would be much as the same as any other day. For Christmas dinner, one family might serve passenger pigeon or partridge. Another, it could be pork pie, or believe it or not, squirrel pie, which was common in those days. It was served with cornbread, potatoes, turnip, cabbage, and other vegetables for a feast. But everyone tried to have some fancy dessert. In 1769, the crew of Captain Cook's ship Endeavour celebrated Christmas in the Pacific with goose pie, and Cook recorded, "All hands as drunk as our forefathers used to be upon like occasions." In 1800, the first English Christmas tree was raised by Queen Charlotte, who was the wife of King George III. In 1833, the Factory Act makes Sundays, Christmas, and Good Friday the only days without work eliminating approximately 40 saints' days and commemorations. In Canada, people found other cultural traditions they wanted to incorporate. The Dutch and German heritage of St. Nicholas Day on December the 6th. The Scandinavians would have the day of Santa Lucia on December the 13th. For the Scots, it was New Year's Day that got all the focus for festivities. Boxing Day became the day when employers provided boxes with gifts or money to their servants, employees, and other household agents, such as the chimney sweep or the livery stable operator. This was a day when families and neighbors would share or exchange one's best skills and products as gifts to equalize both talents and benefits across the community, so everyone might survive the winter shortages. Victorian Christmas, roughly 1840 to 1800 or 1900, provides the foundation for the Christmas traditions we have today. In 1822, Clement Clark Moore pens A Visit from St. Nicholas. I think most of us are familiar with that one, and begins to tell the character of St. Nicholas. More and more, St. Nicholas, or Father Christmas, was described as a jolly old elf known as Santa Claus, and included elves and fairies as helpers. In 1840, brings the establishment of the penny post, which permits the sending of Christmas cards, an idea of Henry Cole in 1843. In 1843, 44, and 45, Charles Dickens publishes an annual Christmas story, A Christmas Carol, The Chimes, and Cricket on the Hearth. Telling ghost stories at Christmas was a tradition, and Dickens tried to weave charity into each of these stories. A White Christmas was part of Dickens' youth and was written into each story. In 1848, there was a picture in the Illustrated London News of a Christmas tree in the royal household, which makes German tradition all the rage with paper chains, ribbons, and tinsel, candles, glass balls, and other decorations on the tree. The royal family also introduced gingerbread, family gatherings, and the formal fancy Christmas dinner, all without alcoholic spirits. Homes were decorated with traditional greenery and mistletoe, though Victorians would be shocked to see a symbol of death, the wreath, being used to decorate for Christmas. Queen Victoria didn't like all the drinking and partying with the season, so rather than outlaw Christmas, she encouraged Christmas Day to be a day for family and children. 1847, English poorhouses were granted extra funds for Christmas dinners. In 1851, the English royal family dines for the first time on turkey instead of swan or goose. But in 1852, a Christmas barrett of beef served to the royal family weighs 446 pounds. While the tradition was to serve goose or beef, in Canada, turkey is becoming the dinner of choice. Caroling became part of the Christmas service with many new Christmas carols. In Canada, these new ideas of trees, cards, crackers, and more were accepted very slowly. The earliest recorded hockey game in Canada happens in 1855. In 1867, Christmas is declared a holiday in Canada, but for federal workers. And in 1874, the first formal Christmas window is a doll collection in R.H. Massey and Company's store windows in New York. In 1871, the Bank Holiday Act makes Boxing Day a day of rest in the UK. Christmas slowly grew from being just a one-day public celebration to return once again to be a longer celebration reaching to New Year's. Queen Victoria disliked the unruliness of Twelfth Night, full of too much Halloween-type mischief with masquerades, games, and hijinks. So it was outlawed in favor of Hogmanay on New Year's Eve. New Year's Day was for the community celebrations as the French and Scots celebrated. The focus of New Year's included house cleaning, religious vigils, resolutions, plus parties, and Hogmanay, which was very much like Twelfth Night revels, even though the Queen didn't realize that. Modern Christmas from 1900 to roughly 1930. In 1905, the world's first Santa Claus parade took place in Toronto when Santa Claus was met at Union Station by a carriage and a band to parade to Eaton's supermarket. Santa Claus begins to acquire this particular look. And when you consider that this picture of Santa Claus is thanks to Coca-Cola, and that Coca-Cola's colors are red and white, not surprisingly, Santa Claus acquires the colors of red and white. Gift giving, and of course, now the parade continues as an ongoing tradition copied by other communities. Gift giving became an increasing part of Christmas. Department store Christmas windows became an attraction. A popular musical device was the gramophone that provided music that didn't require any musical talent. In 1906, Canadian inventor Reginald Fessenden should be recognized as the father of the radio when he transmitted a Christmas Eve concert of music and human voice to ships at sea. The candy shop with lollipops, blocks of chocolate, mints were just some of the tasty treats difficult to make at home. In 1914, during World War I, there was widespread fraternization and an unofficial truce on the Western Front. It was never repeated because the commanders made sure that it wouldn't be repeated. Christmas was now 8 days from Christmas Eve through to New Year's Day. Christmas during the Depression and the war from 1930 to 1948. The Depression brings a simplified Christmas. In 1930, families on the prairies celebrate a lean Christmas after a summer of drought. In 1932, unemployment hits 25%, so Christmas is without any flair. Also in 1932, Christmas is enhanced by a message by King George V when he makes the first royal broadcast to the peoples of the British Empire via the radio. The radio becomes one of the major sources for sharing Christmas traditions across all that can hear. In 1939, The Wizard of Oz is released in movie theaters. This is a sign that Christmas entertainment moves from the stage to the cinema. Also in 1939, the first Christmas for Canada during World War II. Christmas is even more, and just a collection of some of the movies that have become popular over the course of our passage of time. Christmas is even more meager with rationing, resulting in greater sharing. In 1940, the first Christmas in Canada for members of the Dutch royal family. 1940 to 45, families host pilots during Christmas who are in Canada as part of the British Commonwealth Air Training Plan. And in 1944, the Canadian Army captures Ravenna in northern Italy. Post-war Christmas is also modest as the economy moves slowly to peacetime recovery. the very modern Christmas, roughly 1948 to the present, Santa's helpers get greater attention, like Rudolph. And in 1948, Eaton's Canada creates Pumpkinhead, the sad little bear, as a helper of Santa Claus here at their stores. People don't have to venture out to the theater or even the cinema with the advent of the television, but some do. In 1950 is the first Disney TV show, and it airs 1 hour in Wonderland is the title. In 1954, Peter Tchaikovsky's Nutcracker Ballet is performed in New York and becomes an annual favorite in many large centers. And in 1956, Old Yeller opens in movie theaters. Some of the last vestiges of the Puritanism are discarded in 1958, when Scotland celebrates Christmas officially for the first time since 1690. Lights are not just for trees now, whether those trees are real or artificial. Now they are strung around outside on houses and in gardens and shine for more than a month. 1959, Simcoe, Ontario organizes the first Christmas light show and starts a trend of other Christmas panoramas and light up nights in communities across Canada and North America. The Christmas season is now seen as the month of December and comes with greater gift giving. The season has other commemorations for Canadians. In 1971 is the birth of an individual who will become Canada's 23rd Prime Minister. And in 1989, St. Nicholas Day becomes a tragic anniversary for Canadians with the murder of 14 young women at École Polytechnique in Montreal. Boxing Day slowly changes to become a day for shops to hold special sales to sell unsold Christmas merchandise, especially candy, wrapping paper, and Christmas cards, so that they don't have to store them for the year. And New Year's Day now brings the season to the end, and Queen Victoria would be very pleased to know that it is a much tamer celebration than she remembered Twelfth Night. Christmas has changed in subtle ways over time, but has always been a social time full of much of the same spirit we'll celebrate this Christmas. May you have a Merry Christmas.